Alright, so it's been a couple of months, but now we're going to pick up the second half of the English, which I really like the show, and I didn't want to give off the wrong vibe of just taking a massive break like halfway into the show. But we were doing like a lot of videos at one time there, and I just got really burned out on doing the whole review video thing. So that got me a little bit held back. But with this being Emily Blunt's birthday, because I'm shooting this on February 23rd, I'm not sure when it's going to actually go up, but that's that on top of the fact that obviously SAG is this coming weekend, and they were gracious enough to nominate her yet again because they know what they're talking about. Um, and they always make the right choice because her peers adore her, as everyone should. So, all of that got me back in the mood to do this whole thing again and pick up where we left off, which I remember for the most part. Going into like that first half, admittedly, there were some cases where I felt like I was kind of having trouble following it completely. But I feel like, especially this, lays a lot of groundwork as far as story, so I imagine with this whole flashback episode going into the last two episodes, things will start to sort of round themselves out in a much clearer way, and it'll all make sense when it comes together. In the meantime, we did leave off with Eli and the awesomely named Kills on Water talking about this massacre at Chalk River that happened, and so we go back 15 years prior to kind of see what the whole setup is for this. And I wasn't really counting on getting like a whole flashback that kind of spells out. It fills in a lot of blanks, but there's still enough room to see where everything's going to kind of round out as it goes. But I was actually really liking that. The only thing I don't like about it, obviously, is that even though this is a good show, like in itself, I imagine many people, but definitely me, the only really the reason I'm watching the show and the reason that I'm even doing this whole thing talking about it is because of Blunt. Like I'm just kind of here to see Blunt, which we don't get a lot of in this episode. Like I said, once it comes back around, though, it all kind of starts to make sense. But as far as like staying in the flashback, the reason I think I like that the most, even though it doesn't leave a lot of Cornelia room or anything, but the idea of if it had done like a us getting pieces of this and going back and forth in time between 15 years earlier and then 15 years later, there is like one like split second where we do cut back to Eli with Kills on Water, and then we just come right back to the 15 years later, which or earlier, which I think that even further illustrates that it does feel a bit more immersive, just kind of keeping us in the flashback for a whole episode and kind of giving us the whole vibe of it going in, rather than doing the cutting back and forth. Because doing the cutting back and forth would have had probably have taken over at least two episodes. So to kind of just get the whole bit here, like all at once, I do feel like was a good way to go. Like I said, it really helps with the immersion factor, especially, I feel like. So a lot of our time is spent with Tom Hughes, who we've met before, and Steve Wall, and we've also got Rafe Spall coming in, who is pretty clearly our villain. He does make that clear pretty quickly when we just like a little tiny bit in his first scene or two. I was getting Tom Hardy vibes, which is not a bad thing at all. Especially when you're playing a villain in this kind of setting, like we saw Hardy do in The Revenant. While Rafe Spall isn't ramped up that much, I do feel like this is the most ramped up I've ever seen Rafe Spall, and I like it. So going into that, the way we see this character play out, where he's a guy that could be extremely threatening and dangerous, or he could be full of shit, or he could just be both. And I think it's pretty clear by the end of the episode that we're pretty much dealing with both. And he's one of those characters where whenever he says it, you can kind of see, especially in the later scenes when he's actually with Cornelia. I love the way Spall plays that, where we know that he's lying because we've seen everything play out, and now he's relaying. what he's telling her happened. And the way he, like, hesitates on words, or, like, he trips over words, and it's like, we know that he's lying because we saw it, but I feel like if we were to see this out of context, it wouldn't. You can tell he's lying because he's tripping over words, but it still wouldn't be that hard to believe because it feels so natural the way he's doing it. Like, it's easy to see how Cornelia could believe this guy's lies for the brief period that she does. Um, and then playing up this really sort of vicious and dangerous angle. I like the sort of juxtaposition of his scenes with Cornelia, where he's like well dressed and his hair is like kind of wet and he's all that. He looks very sort of distinguished, and just prior to this, the last time we saw him, he like didn't have a shirt. He was covered in blood and he was growling. And so it's like being able to play those two aspects where we see this guy in this one way, and then being able to believe that he could come right back around and fool somebody into thinking he's somebody that he's clearly not, and sort of hide the vicious nature of himself. With it just sort of like it's desperately trying to break through when it almost looks like his lies are going to slip up and he's trying to sort of think of them in real time. It's a very interesting character to watch this play out, especially if he's going to kind of be the villain of the story, especially as we're kind of coming to a conclusion. Um, and there's a point in time in the flashback where it's the flashback before we cut back to Eli is like a good, like, over half the episode, like half an hour of the episode, and for a while there's only one mention of Cornelia, but it's such like a dramatic sort of name drop moment at that time that it's still like Cornelia has power in this story even when she's not here, even though it's because she's in danger is why it's being dropped. Still, there's something there that has this sort of power to it, where she can bring that even when she's off screen, because that's the power of Blunt. Um, I like the way a lot of this was shot, like a lot of the very vast outdoor stuff, and how a lot of the times in this flashback, the backdrop is just this completely clear blue sky that just looks massive on camera, with them behind them, with it behind them, and how everything, like, it's almost like you can smell the outdoors when you're watching this episode, which is something that's always really fascinated me when something's really well shot. And it's uncharacteristically warm for the end of February. Also, that's probably doing this a lot of favor. This is like the perfect time to watch this episode. Um, and so we're bringing in these characters. We have Julian Bleach playing Jerome, who's definitely got this sort of distinguished, memorable face that really fits this character. Where you get the sense that these characters, he and Rafe Spall in particular, have this sort of evil in them, but it's obviously been set up that some shit went down. But it's like just sort of waiting for that to play out and like what exactly it's gonna be. And it brought itself full circle to the story in a way that I wasn't really counting on. Like I said, unless there's things that have been established that I've forgotten or kind of went past me, because things are getting, kind of complicated, and there's a lot of characters coming in and out. But yeah, the way it sort of it's starting to come full circle, was not a way that I was counting on. And that it's because obviously we do reach a very dramatic, unmentionable conclusion to this episode, and that's where that puts us in the story now, especially obviously because Blunt's so amazing already up to this point. It makes me want to go back to like, even before we're done here with those last two episodes, it makes me want to go back to the previous episodes and watch this performance now that we know, because we've already talked about how she clearly came from, like, a sort of high class place, but now we've seen her when the show starts. She's already been through this massive change, and she's seeking vengeance now, and so we've been watching that play out. But it's like, now that we've seen her before that, and then seeing what exactly has happened, that's where it's like, now I can only imagine it reminds me of My Summer of Love, where it's one of those performances where it's a great performance on the surface the first time you watch it, and you can see, little layers already, but when the end is revealed and we know everything we know about this character, suddenly everything that came before is a totally different performance. And so she's really early in her career. That was like her first major movie. She was already mastering that kind of thing. So to see her bring that here also, where it's like there's stuff that's not revealed to us until much later that had to have been playing a part in this performance all along. Now I definitely want to go back and see the little nuances she surely put in there. Um, because also when we see her pre-change here, there's one moment where she's laughing while she's talking. This is like when she's just entered the room before anything bad has happened. Like right now, she's probably under the impression that nothing bad could ever happen in her life. And then as she's talking, she laughs, and I've talked before about how she has a very distinct laugh in real life, so you can tell when she's laugh acting because it's not her real laugh. And I did a whole thing about that when we talked about salmon fishing in the Yemen. And here, where there's just a very sort of, like, it seems like a nothing detail, but it is just this subtle thing that I find really effective that can make a character even more authentic than something that people might not even think about or pay attention to. She's really good about finding those little details, especially when, like I said, a character's laughing for one reason or another. Um, but then when we kind of see the follow-up scene where she realizes now that Rafe Spall has been lying to her, and I love that you can already kind of see a change here. Like, obviously the major tragedies that happened to her have not happened quite. They're about to, but they haven't quite yet. But there's still, even when she's put together she's been lied to, there's already this sort of change. Like, it already feels like her character's a little bit darker than she was, like, the previous day or however long prior it was, the first time they met. And yeah, and so to see that now, to see where this darkness is going to lead in these last two episodes, is what we've been waiting on the whole time. Like I said, now that we've got much more context, I'm excited to see even more so where that's going to go and how she's going to use it for this character. And that's really exciting. And also the moment when he's telling her the story, or his version of the story, and that interesting decision to use music instead of dialogue. So it's just her reacting off of what she's hearing, and it's stuff like that where I love that Hugo Blick not only cast her, but knew that he could trust her with stuff like that. And knows that she's good enough that she doesn't even need dialogue. Like, you can just have her reacting with everything zoned out, and it's gonna get the points across. And I love when directors have faith in her, because obviously she can do just about anything, and so to really utilize that and really let her just do her thing in moments like that, are things that I really appreciate seeing whenever she's in something. So yeah, and as far as the episode itself and the show itself, yeah, there's a lot of great tension here in some of these earlier scenes. There's the moment when things are really building, and you know something's about to go. Like, not only do we just know in context that something's going to go down here in this flashback scene in the middle of nowhere, but the way not only just the way the score is working, but there's also that detail of Trafford, like, breaking those twigs, and it feels like we're kind of getting closer and closer to his hands as he does it, and there's the way they build tension on that, and the fact that we already know something explosive is coming. I love that they're still able to build the suspense about when is it going to happen, and, like, who's going to go down and all this, and what exactly is, what even is the catalyst for everything that goes down, is some really fantastic tension building, and just the surprising brutality that keeps coming out of the show. Also, the brother guy that was, like, hung upside down with all the arrows in him. It's like the show kind of seems like it's just sort of going on its way, and then it'll just sort of hit you with this really unexpected violence. And most of it is like aftermath. Like, the arrows is aftermath, and the stuff with Cornelia at the end of the episode is aftermath, but it still has a sort of punch, this sort of gut punch quality to it. So I think that's pretty much how I feel about this episode. Like I said, I imagine we'll get a lot more Cornelia in the last two episodes, which is what I'm really here for. But yeah, the story itself and the way it's playing out is quite intriguing, and Blick is clearly a... I don't know if filmmaker's the word for a TV show or a miniseries, but yeah, filmmaker. That's that's what's going on here. So yeah, so I still really appreciate what's going on here, and yeah, I'm excited to go back to those other episodes now, just kind of look at her performance even more intricately and see the small details, and like I said, where that's gonna take us in these last few episodes, where things can get really explosive, hopefully. And we'll see whether it be emotionally explosive or action or her seeking vengeance, whatever it is. I feel like she's gonna make it work. So yeah, so until the next couple episodes, I think that's it.